Hello, I am Pamela Jan, and I'm really excited because I'll be honored to interview a man who doesn't need introduction, but for those who want to know a bit more about him, he is an internationally renowned psychologist and best-selling author of many books like Emotional Intelligence, Focus, Primal Leadership, and Altered Traits. He was a science journalist for the New York Times, where he wrote for years about the brain and behavioral sciences. And in 2023, he was awarded the Centennial Medal from the Harvard Graduate School of Arts and Sciences for excellence in communicating science. Ladies and gentlemen, Madame and Monsieur, with you, the man, the legend, the great Daniel Goleman. How are you, Daniel?
Hello, Pamela. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for that very kind introduction.
How do you feel today?
I feel fine. I feel good. It's I'm outside New York City, maybe a half hour outside. It's a little cool today. It was warmer yesterday, but otherwise fine. Thank you.
Great. Let me tell you how I feel about this interview. But first of all, give me a second so I can find the correct terms to describe it. So, first of all, self-awareness, labeling process. Got it. I feel ecstatic. I feel thrilled. I feel beyond thankful. And I feel optimal.
Wonderful.
So,
yeah.
Daniel, before we delve into your book, which is what we're going to talk about mainly today,
Yeah.
I'm sure our audience feels, like really curious about how did your scientific studies on the brain led you to focus on emotional intelligence, concentration, and productivity?
As you mentioned, I was a science journalist at the New York Times. And before I wrote the book, Emotional Intelligence, I'd actually been covering a lot of new findings on the brain and emotions. That back then was a brand new field for science. And I felt I wanted to write a book about it. And then the idea of emotional intelligence came along. My job at the Times was reading scientific articles and then really translating them for the general public. And I saw an article in a very little known journal, and the article was called Emotional Intelligence. I thought, wow, that is a great term, because it sounds like it doesn't fit. Emotions and intelligence, they don't go together. But then I realized it was really being intelligent about emotion. And I'm very pleased that you're highly self-aware. That's one of the four main parts of emotional intelligence. Knowing what you feel, that's the self-awareness. Then being able to manage those feelings, keeping the upsetting ones a little bit under control, but also marshaling positive feelings, tuning into the feelings of others, empathy, that social awareness. That's the third part. And then the fourth part is putting all of that together to have effective relationships. That's what we mean by emotional intelligence.
Right. And this book, Optimal, How to Sustain Personal and Organizational Excellence Every Day. It's your fifth book on the topic and your first with co-author Carrie Chernis.
Sure.
And it comes 28 years after your seminal work, Emotional Intelligence, that brought this phrase into widespread use. But I'm pretty sure every book is like a complete adventure, a complete experience. And one of the things I love most about teaching or writing is that you need to learn in order to
right.
teach, So what satisfactions and lessons did writing this book bring to you, Daniel?
Well, actually, Pamela, I'm glad you asked that, because when I wrote the book Emotional Intelligence, it was a brand new concept, and there was very little direct research that supported the idea. It was all coming from different angles, and it seemed to make sense. So Carrie Chernis and I were co-directors of the Consortium for Research on Emotional Intelligence. And now, almost 30 years later, as you point out, we've been able to collect all the data. There have been so many studies, and it's highly supportive of emotional intelligence. And in the book Optimal, we show how the concept makes great sense. It matters for organizations, for leaders, for teams, and for each of us in how we experience our day.
Yeah, completely. And your work encompasses the concept of self-care to reach optimal levels. But why do you think that humans tend to self-sabotage?
Well, I think that we're kind of wired uh, in uh, in the brain to remember negative things that happen to us more strongly than we remember positive things, to
Mhm.
have more negative emotions than positive emotions. And I think it takes a kind of intention, an effort to actually make our abilities to keep a positive mindset, a growth mindset for ourselves, for other people, for the people in our lives, the people we love, to care about them. I think all of that takes some intention because, it's, as you say, it's very easy to self sabotage, to fall prey to anxiety or anger, and to not be able to contact whatever will get you into a more positive state. So, one of the steps is what you just mentioned earlier, which is being aware of how you're feeling right now. How is it shaping how you see the world, how you think about the world, how is it affecting what you want to do, your impulse to act? One
Mhm.
definition of maturity, interesting, is increasing the gap between your emotional impulse, like emote means to move, you want to do something, and your actual action. That gap is very important. It's a mark of maturity.
Wow, that's interesting. And you say positive emotions. Are there good or bad emotions, or are they positive or negative? What's the
Well,
difference?
so my
Mhm.
feeling is this: every emotion has its place. Emotions are the body's way of telling us something important. Sadness is important. You know, if you lose someone you love, you need to just stand still and register the grief and, think how you're going to live your life now. Anger is saying, there's an obstacle you need to pay attention to. But
Mhm.
if you're and anxiety is, there may be something you should be apprehensive about. But the question is, are we letting those emotions get out of control, too overwhelming, so that we can't do what we have to do, take care of the kids or pay attention at work, whatever it may be? Is our emotion getting in our way? And it's very important to understand that emotion drives attention. So you can't help but think about and pay attention to whatever the emotion is driving you toward. And this may, for example, get in the way of your being with your family or getting your work done well. So being able to manage upsetting emotion, whenever an emotion does get upsetting, turns out to be a positive value. And the way I think about emotional intelligence, there's not a good or bad emotion per se, but if they become overwhelming and get in the way of what you need to do, what matters right now, then you need to do something about it.
Completely. And in this sense, what could happen to a person with very high cognitive intelligence and technical competences, but low emotional intelligence? For example, someone in a STEM job like scientists, engineers, or like
Sure.
IT person whose sole responsibility is to keep computers, programs, and systems
Sure.
running. Would that be enough in order to achieve success for them?
Well, here's the paradox about cognitive abilities and emotional intelligence. Our IQ, our cognitive ability matters enormously during our school years. Getting good grades and advancing in school depends on that. Getting an advanced degree depends on your cognitive ability. However, this is the paradox. Once you're in a field like IT or like engineering, how you do actually no longer depends on your cognitive ability so much because everyone's as smart as you are. That's when emotional intelligence matters. I just saw data from a study with engineers at a global manufacturing company, and engineers rated other engineers on how effective that person was as an engineer. And it turned out that their effectiveness as an engineer had nothing to do with their IQ and was predicted by their emotional intelligence. Why? Because they can manage themselves well and they could handle relationships well. So, if you're highly intelligent, you have a high IQ, but you have a low EQ, a low emotional intelligence, I think you will not be as effective in your job, whatever it is. If you're someone's boss, you're going to be a boss people hate, not a boss people love.
So this is how EI could be a predictor of performance.
So EI, thank you for using that. Instead, I think EQ, which is widely used, is a little sloppy. So I prefer EI for emotional intelligence. And I have to now ask you to repeat the question, Pamela.
Sure. The question is, how does EI could be a predictor of performance?
Oh, yeah.
Because, okay.
Yeah. So emotional intelligence, we found in looking at all of this data, turns out to be highly important for performance. For example, one study of 65,000 entrepreneurs found that emotional intelligence was twice as important in their success as an entrepreneur as was their IQ. And we find this in field after field, that emotionally intelligent leaders, for example, are much more effective in their leadership. And people do better people perform better if their leader, if their boss has emotional intelligence. And then again, people perform better if they have emotional intelligence. This came up in the research that we start the book Optimal with, which came from a study done at the Harvard Business School, where they asked hundreds of men and women to keep a journal of what happened and how they felt every day and how well they did. And they realized that they got a composite of what a really good day at work looks like. And it's a day when people are very absorbed in what they're doing. They're paying full attention. They're satisfied with how they do. They're performing well. They like what they're doing. They're not going to quit, for example. They feel good doing it, and they're pretty well connected with the people around them. All of those are signs of being in an optimal state. And it turns out that the more emotionally intelligent you are, the more likely you are to get into that state.
In this book, you talk about how our leaders or authorities' emotions can even get contagious, right? So, but what does this happen, Daniel?
Well, the brain is designed to lock into the brain of the person or people we're with and create a kind of bridge. It's unconscious, it's automatic, it's instantaneous, and it's a bridge for feelings. It's a bridge for knowing what the other person is doing or intending. It's what keeps our interaction smooth. But this bridge is used in many ways, and it's important to understand. So, for example, there was a study done with women in a brain scan who were about to get an electric shock. And if someone held their hand, their anxiety went down. If their husband held their hand, it disappeared. What this means is that we are biologically active in the body of people we love. It's a very important finding. And also, I think the same bridge, invisible bridge, is why emotions are highly contagious. In a work group, for example, if the leader of that group is in a negative mood, people in the group catch the mood and their performance goes down. If the leader's in a positive mood, then their mood goes up and their performance goes up. By the way, I think this is very important in the classroom. I think that the teacher, who is the most influential person in that room, affects the inner state of the students. And there are some states where learning doesn't come easily, and some where they actually it optimizes the ability to learn. So teachers need to pay attention to their own state because it's going to communicate to everyone, to the kids in the room. When we do social emotional learning programs, one of the best practices is to have teachers go through the program too, so that they will be a good model for their students. And it's the same in the workplace.
Wow. And does this happen the same with stress?
Unfortunately, yes. So if you're stressed out and you're leading a group, people will feel stressed out. And also, if you're a boss, if you're the leader of a group of people, you're likely to stress them. And
Mm.
constant stress leads to emotional exhaustion, which leads to burnout and people wanting to leave or leaving. So it's really important that people individually for themselves and organizations realize the importance of time off, of recovery time. And recovery might be something really simple, spending time with kids or people you love or your pet or walk in nature or meditation or yoga, whatever relaxes you deeply. The body wants that because it's designed to have periods of stress, the fight or flight emergency response. And then it needs to relax and recover because during that stress, it takes energy from the immune system, the cardiovascular system, and you need to recover those systems. You need to rebuild them. And that takes time off. So I always encourage people to schedule in their day time for themselves, for whatever is nurturing for them, because that helps you do better when you're in the thick of it.
There are many, many ways to better handle life's stresses, inevitable stresses. But how could specifically EI help us cope with stress and be more resilient? Because you talk about resilience in this book,
Sure.
and how to find emotional balance in the face of stress.
Well, one of the abilities after self-awareness, knowing what you're feeling, is then managing those feelings well. And if you're, as I said before, if you're upset and it's overwhelming, then you want to be able to be what we call resilient. And resilience technically means the time it takes you from the peak of your upset to recover, to calm and clear. And happily, resilience can be learned. It's not that we're necessarily at the mercy of our upsetting emotions. We can learn to recover. There are many methods for it. And I really recommend doing something that you find will help you also daily so that you build the strength. So when we talk about managing emotions, there are two prongs to that. One is keeping your overwhelming negative emotions under control. The other is marshaling positive emotions, a positive attitude, the feeling that an optimism that good things can happen, good things are happening, being grateful for those things, acknowledging the things that work in your life and that are helping you along. That's important. And there are things like keeping your eye on the goals that matter to you. What gives meaning to what you're doing, and where are you going? And are you letting the distractions of the day, your phone or whatever it may be, distract you from what matters to you, to the big goals in your life? That's also part of managing yourself.
So, if emotions and feelings have to do with thoughts, many times people ask me, Pam, how can I learn to control
Yeah.
my thoughts, my own thoughts, because sometimes there are just patterns and habitual thoughts. So, what can we do about them?
So the first step is to notice your thoughts. Many times we just get immersed in our thoughts and go wherever they take us. But if you can step back a little and realize you don't have to necessarily believe everything that comes along in your mind. Sometimes, for example, you may find yourself critical, putting yourself down in your own mind. That's not helpful. That actually leads to depression, to feelings of unworthiness, and you can challenge those thoughts. This is kind of basic cognitive therapy. I have to recommend my wife's book, which is the first to blend mindfulness and cognitive therapy. It's called emotional alchemy. Very useful for managing thoughts, particularly the thoughts that we wish we didn't have.
Wow, I love this concept of you don't have to believe everything you think about it,
That's right.
because we are not our thoughts, right?
Luckily, it's true.
Completely. And we've been listening, I believe, this last year is a lot about burnout. But
Oh,
has burnout always existed, or why has it become a prevalent issue in today's work life?
well, I think that work is more stressful than it's been in the past, no matter what you do, whether it's competition, the layoffs, the fear of a layoff, and just the sheer number of things you have to do in a workday, I think is increased and it creates more stress. And stress is the ingredient that leads to burnout. It's the road to burnout. And as I said, if you're constantly stressed, with no chance to recover, you get into this state of emotional exhaustion where I
Mhm.
just can't take this anymore. You feel, there's actually a technical article in the journal Science called The Neurobiology of Frazzle. You feel frazzled. Your mind doesn't work as well. You feel like you just want to stop. And that is sadly what leads to burnout, to feeling like I just can't do this anymore. And there are many antidotes to burnout, but one of the main ones is just to remember I need to have some recovery time and to plan it, to, to make it a priority.
But sometimes we believe that the recovery time is about social media, so we are still connected 24/7. So that's stressful.
I I don't think the physiology would show that social media is really a recovery time. I think putting it aside, I recommend mindfulness of breathing as a core concept. I'll give you the basic instruction. Actually, it's very simple. You just find a time and a place where you won't be interrupted. Close your eyes and bring your awareness to your breath. The in breath, be fully aware. The out breath, the gap between breaths, then the next breath, the in breath and the out breath. And when your mind wanders, and it will wander, and you notice that it wandered, then bring your attention back to the next breath. And you do this for maybe 5 minutes to begin, extend it. And what the science finds about this method is that it tends to calm people, to give them more clarity afterward. And so it's a very useful exercise. It's really for mental fitness. It's very similar to going to the gym. And when you lift a weight, every time you lift that weight, every repetition makes that muscle that much more, that much
Mhm.
stronger. Same with this exercise in bringing your mind back. Every time you do that, you strengthen the circuitry for paying full attention. And what we found with the optimal state is that one of the ways you can get into a best state to work effectively is to pay full attention to what you're doing. And if you strengthen that capacity through this kind of mental fitness exercise, it becomes easier and easier.
I'm doing that breath work as I'm listening to you because, of course, I'm nervous, but I mean, Daniel Goleman. But and it really helps, because that helps me, as you say, be clear and more relaxed and more focused and in an optimal state. And there
Oh,
are many comments from the people who's watching us. For
sure.
example, Pablo Padilla says, "Love this man. Thanks for this interview." Daniel Torres, he recommends to take a walk, do some exercise, read a book, go to the nature or beach. And yes, Daniel Torres says those kind of chill activities can relax your mind. But how can we identify burnout? Which are the signs or those red flags?
I think it's pretty easy. You feel terrible. Yeah.
But is for example, does it makes an impact in our health? Or it's only about brain fog?
One
Or
of the
it's about,
Good point.
yeah.
One of the signs of burnout or over too much stress is we have problems like headaches or backaches or stomach aches that have no known medical cause, but it's stress. Stress will do that to you. So you may get the first signs of burnout that you notice in health problems that don't go away. That's a sign. And, stress is kind of normative in the workplace these days. People get used to it. Everyone else is under the same pressures, but it doesn't mean it's healthy for us. It doesn't mean that we don't need time to recover. We do. And we need to pay attention to the signs of stress. And, constant anxiety is another one. It may not show up in a headache or a backache, but it shows up in worrying all the time. And that's another sign that we need to give ourselves a recovery, so a restful period in the day.
How can we differentiate between fear and anxiety? How can we know if we are experiencing fear, for example, or if it's an intense anxiety? Because sometimes people get a little bit lost in this too. I
Yes.
mean,
And I really believe that every emotion has its place. Anxiety is a way that we warn ourselves something's coming that we need to prepare for. And then if we prepare for it, that's good because then we handle it better. But if your anxiety is constant, if you wake up in the middle of the night and that's the first thought you have, that those anxious thoughts, if you're anxious about something a week later, why didn't she answer my email? It might be something very seemingly trivial, but it might be very important to you. That's a sign that your anxiety is out of control. That's too
okay.
much. And one of the benefits of that exercise that we just did with the breath is that it not only focuses attention, it lowers anxiety. It's an antidote. So you can do it just physiologically through doing an exercise like that. You can also handle it if you realize that your thoughts are out of control. You can intentionally say, "Well, I'm every time I have the kind of thought, I'm going to counter it. I'm going to remind myself, well, she might have been really busy. Maybe she didn't see my email." In other words, you're going to remind yourself that there's realistic reasons that your anxiety might be unneeded. That's a cognitive therapy method.
Mhm. Marisol Bautista is asking she says, reading provokes me anxiety. Um, any recommendation? Because I really want to do that. Thank you, Dana, for sharing knowledge. You're a master.
So, where's the question there, Pamela?
How can she manage that reading provokes her anxiety? Maybe she's
Oh,
associating reading with something else,
oh,
or
okay. So, reading books may or may not help you particularly. Um, I think you and all of us would do well to find something that actually lowers anxiety. For example, some people say, well, I'm going to go jogging. However, when you go jogging, if your mind is still running through the same anxious thoughts, it's not helping. One of the reasons I like the mindfulness of the breath is that in order to pay full attention to the breath, you're stopping other thoughts. So it's a way of teaching your brain to ignore those thoughts that you don't need to think and to focus on something neutral, on the breath. And that is a kind of a mental fitness exercise, as I said, that gets stronger and stronger the more you practice. We find what you call a dose response, uh, which means that the more you practice that, say the breathing technique, the better the benefits.
and we often hear about emotional intelligence in our professional development, but how can we introduce this topic to young people? As you say in your newsletter at LinkedIn, how
Mm.
can we shape an emotionally intelligent future?
Uh, there are programs for kids called social emotional learning, SEL. There are more than 100 now, and they fit into the standard curriculum. I don't really actually take that much time. So, for example, I visited a classroom in what in New York is called Spanish Harlem. It's a fairly impoverished neighborhood. The kids in the class lived in housing projects next to the school. And a lot of the kids in this class, which was a 7, 8-year-old class, had problems like attention deficit disorder, which is
Mhm.
very common these days. And I thought the class would be pretty chaotic, but actually the kids were pretty calm and pretty focused. I said to the teacher, why are they so calm and focused? And she said, well, every day we do this, and we call it belly buddies. One by one, each child goes to their cubby and gets their favorite little stuffed animal, finds a place to lie down on the floor, and puts that animal on their belly, and they watch it rise on the in breath and fall on the in breath, out breath. Basically, what you're doing is teaching them this attention strengthening exercise to be pay more attention. That means you're going to learn more, and also to be more calm. So this can be taught to kids. These are 7-year-old kids, and they love it because they find it's a great break from the school day. So social emotional learning handles the spectrum of emotional intelligence, teaches it to kids, but in a developmentally appropriate way. So you do it one way for 7-year-olds, another way for 10-year-olds, another way for 14-year-olds, but you do it continually. And I think it gives kids a very strong foundation for life. That's what I
Yeah,
recommend.
totally. Because negative emotions can get in the way of developing the kids' talents and cognitive functions, right?
There's a direct relationship. The more your brain is captured by negative emotions, particularly strong ones, the narrower the window for attention, the less you can pay attention to what the teacher is saying or what's in your book. So there's a direct relationship. Helping kids stay focused and calm helps them learn better.
Of course, learn better and have a better social life. And this has to be to do with empathy, right? Because why does empathy matters and could boost social intelligence and allow us to make an optimal impact?
Empathy is the equivalent of self awareness. It's the essential foundation. Being able to tune into the people around us then lets us handle the relationship that much better. If we don't notice, if we're clueless about the other people, we're going to have terrible relationships. But the more we can be aware, and this is interesting, there are 3 different kinds of empathy. One is cognitive. I know how you think about things. I know the language you use, which means I can communicate effectively with you because I can use that language talking to you. The other, though, which relies on a different part of the brain, is emotional empathy. I sense how you feel. And that matters enormously too in an effective relationship. And then the third kind, which is, I think, very important, is empathic concern. It's not just that I know how you think and feel, I care about you. This is what you want in your friends and your lovers and your spouses, and what kids want in their parents, what kids want in their teacher, what we want in our boss at work, this third kind of empathy. And for example, in a workplace, that builds trust, it builds rapport, it builds a feeling that my boss has my best interests at heart, and I'll give my best because of that.
Now, suppose I'm a parent or a boss or a leader, how can I boost this kind of empathy?
Well, it's odd, but we spend very little time trying to improve empathy. We empathize, we tune into people, and we make an assumption that we know how they think, feel, and so on. But it's it's good to test it out if you can, to say, I'm sensing you're feeling this. Is that right? Or what would you say? In other words, to create a feedback loop, which is a learning loop that lets your brain tell, was I right or was I wrong? And the brain wants to know this. Or you could say, I'm, I assume you're thinking this about that. Are you? Or, in other words, ask people. That's the way to improve empathy.
Now, suppose I'm a leader, a boss, or a parent. How Or what does it take to inspire others?
I think first you need to think, well, what is inspiring to me about this?
Mhm.
And then can I put that in a way that the person, the kid or the person I'm leading at work will resonate with that? Can I speak from the heart to the heart about our purpose, what has meaning here, what's significant in what we're doing? That's the question.
And Daniel, is this book the culmination of your research, or what's next for Daniel Goleman?
We'll see.
One day at a time.
One day at a time. One thing I'm enjoying is my LinkedIn newsletter, which lets me talk about what I'm interested in. I do it every month and it has a lot of readers, and I'm happy about that. But as for books, I really don't know. We'll see.
But that newsletter is a great way to keep connected with you each day. So
Yeah, I'm
I
very,
really recommend it.
yeah.
Mhm.
And, people who want to go more deeply into emotional intelligence, I'd recommend there's something called the Daniel Goleman Emotional Intelligence Program. It's an online learning. So if you want to get more mastery about the topic, I strongly recommend that. And for teams, if you're on a team at work or in life and want to improve how it works, there's a team EI development
Mm.
process at Goleman Consulting Group. Uh, uh, those are some ways, concrete ways, people who want to go more deeply into this can help themselves.
Thank you. What was your biggest challenge writing this book?
My biggest challenge. The biggest challenge was collecting all the new data together. That's why I
Mm.
turned to Kerry Chernis, co-author, who's really a master. He's a just retired professor at Rutgers University. And as I said, he was the co-chair for decades of the research consortium in this area. So he's really on top of the newest research and the best.
Well, you guys did a great work, and this is a fair warning for all the audience. This book might improve your relationships, your work life, and even as Maggie, who's you'll learn who Maggie is when you read the book. You'll learn how to transform your job into a highly satisfying and fulfilling career, which I believe it's very important these days because we tend like sometimes we work just like zombies, like repeating work one day after the other, and we are not asking ourselves about the impact that we are living in this world
Mm.
or in our own lives, right? So I love Maggie's story in your book. Which is the story that inspired you the most from all the stories that you write about
Well,
in this book?
I repeat as a story that about something that happened to me that I started the book Emotional Intelligence with. It was really surprising.
Mm-hmm.
It was amazing. It was a simple thing. I was riding a bus in Manhattan. It was a very hot and humid day, and I was feeling a little like, don't touch me, don't talk to me. And I got on this bus on Madison Avenue, and the driver looked at me and very warmly said, welcome. How's your day going? Like he cared. And then I realized when I got on the bus, he was carrying on conversation with everyone on the bus. You're looking for suits, there's a great sale at this department store. And did you see the exhibit in this museum? I recommend it. And on and on. People would get off his bus and they would be changed. Everyone got on kind of grumpy and they got off feeling pretty good. And I thought, this guy's magic. But he's a bus driver. I didn't know anything about him. Years later, I saw his obituary in the New York Times. Very unusual for a bus driver to get an obituary in the New York Times. But this guy had fans. People would wait for his bus. He got 3,000 letters of commendation, not one complaint. He was quite amazing. And it turned out he was the pastor of a church. and he saw his passengers as part of his flock. He was tending to his flock by being so amazing. And I think he exemplifies having a higher purpose that you bring to whatever it is you do. You know, the mission statement of the New York Transit Authority that he worked for, something like getting a lot of people to where they want to go on time, very colorless. But he saw something deeper there. And I think this was, for me, a very inspiring story.
Well, thank you for being our driver and our leader. I really celebrate it. And let's see if we have any questions or comments. This is the time, guys. I'm reading you. Let's see. Elena wants to know, what final message can you give us today so you can leave us thinking about it all day long, like.
So emotional intelligence is learned and learnable. It's unlike your cognitive ability. It can be boosted at any time. So the question to ask yourself is, where could I grow? Where could I get better? And how can I do that? I think that's my bottom line.
How can I grow? Where can I get better? And how can I do that? Exactly. I love it. Thank you very much. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks for sharing your time with us. This interview was amazing. I love listening to you and reading you. And thanks for this book. And I hope there will be a lot more, because we love reading you. And well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Pamela, I want to thank you. It's been delightful spending time with you this way. And you're a great interviewer.
Thank you. And today's Happiness International Day.
Oh.
Did you know that?
I didn't know. Well, there you go. It's all about happiness.
Synchronicities. It's all about happiness.
We all want to be happy.
We all want to be. You made us happy today. So thank you very much, and have a great day. And to you, Penguin Random House, thanks for this experience, and thanks for to all of you who are watching, for your questions, for your comments, and have a great day.
Likewise.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming. Enjoy.